Because you listen to this outstanding podcast, I'd like to invite you to check out another one that you may like as well. I'm Tom Rowland, host of Saltwater Experience television show and the Tom Rowland podcast. Each week, I drop 3 brand new shows, including interviews with extreme performers like the true giants of the fishing world, authors, athletes, Navy SEALs, and regular people with extraordinary stories to learn what took them to the top and how we can apply those same principles to our lives. How-to episodes are on Tuesday, and tune in for Physical Fridays to make sure you're on the path to catch a tarpon when you're 95 years old or be at your very best tomorrow. So search for the Tom Rowland Podcast where you listen, or go to tomrowlandpodcast.com and come on over.
This episode is brought to you by Seventh Generation. In New York, climate pollution is not only dangerous, it's expensive. In fact, it's costing the state $27.5 billion annually. But what if, instead of neglecting communities, we invested in them? With better infrastructure, a more stable energy grid, a future-facing, well-trained labor force, and support for low to moderate income households. Tell Albany, invest $15 billion in New York's future. Now's the time. To find out more, visit seventhgeneration.com/climate.
Just get a dumb one. There's a dumb one.
Yo.
Dude, yes.
There he is.
Oh, dude, that's a nice fish.
That's a nice fish.
This is the Amazing Outdoors Podcast. I am Brian Mays. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is episode number 46. Kasey Yallaly. Check out episode 13. She is a returning guest. She's with the Wisconsin DNR. She's a fisheries biologist for Western Wisconsin. All right, folks, before I get on to Kasey, I want to say big thanks to Pat, Todd, Paul. Your hats are in the mail. Thank you very much for being patrons of this show. If you are not a patron, it is $5. You can join for just 1 month. You can join for as many months as you'd like. If you join right now, you'll have an opportunity to scoop up one of the last of the hats for $5. Plus, you're also going to get a drawing for a $200 pair of Uplnd Outfitter hunting pants. Uplnd Outfitter is a sponsor of the show. If you want to go out and buy a pair of these pants, you can use discount code AMAZING. But I think you should join Patreon and take advantage of this opportunity to win a kick-ass pair of hunting pants. Plus get a hat. I mean, diesel isn't cheaper than $5 these days a gallon. So take advantage of this while they last. There's a few good hats left, and they're gonna go soon. Uplnd Outfitters, again, sponsor of the program. Enter in that drawing for a chance to win a pair of pants in June. 1 entry per month between now and June. Get in for as many entries as you'd like. Sport Dog. If you haven't checked out Sport Dog in a while, check them out. They have a full line of training collars, from yard to GPS training collars. Gear the way you'd design it. Make sure you're subscribed and have the downloads on. There's a lot of content coming. We just got wrapped up with Minnesota Sharp-tailed Grouse Society. If you wanted to learn more about Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society, you could check out episode 10 or episode 12. I also want to remind people about Minnesota Sharp-tailed Grouse Society's Spring Fling and Double Gun shoot going on April 30th. I will definitely be there. There should still be some information in the show notes, but if you didn't catch it, check out episode 45. Like I have been mentioning in the last few episodes, if you have not caught episode 40 with Scott Anderson of Patriots of Praise, check it out. Also, spring is coming. The rivers are opening up. I wanted to mention episode 33 because it's with River Rat USA. I took the owner up to Treelands Resort. We participated in last fall's musky fly fishing tournament at Treelands. It was a blast. We had a few toddies, got a little raw. It's a good episode. If you're in the market for a river rat, let me know. Contact me, brian@amazin.com. I can help you out, and I can get you in touch with the ownership, and I can answer any questions you might have. I am guiding full season. This will be the second on one of these boats, and I had a ball in it, and I think it's a really cool vessel. So check out episode 33. Get those hats, join Patreon, Kasey. You've been on the show before, so I will not give this big grand introduction. Thank you for coming back and welcome again to the show.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me back. I had a good time doing this before, so I was excited to come back and talk about some more fisheries related topics in this area.
Well, we know you're a big trout nut, and we're definitely gonna talk some of that, and got a few other cool topics I think we're gonna touch base on today. But
cool.
Yeah, we when you were on last, you were kind of planning on. You mentioned being the pre-call mule deer hunt. I apologize, I didn't recall that. I knew you were heading out west. I couldn't remember for what, but how'd it go?
Awesome.
And you went out for mule deer hunt, right?
Yes. Yeah, we just drew some general season tags with basically no points. So we were kind of on the fence whether we were going to get tags or not. It was me and my boyfriend, and yeah, it went awesome. I'd never hunted Montana before, never hunted mule deer before. Well, I shouldn't say that. I did hunt them when I lived in Washington, but very little. And so it was kind of a new ball game, going to an area we've never been, public land, which I'm a huge fan of. So yeah, we went there, total adventure. Took us a little bit to figure it out, but we eventually got into them way back in the middle of nowhere, and it was awesome. It was one of my favorite trips. I'm like a huge elk hunter, and I love elk, but this rivaled definitely some of my elk hunting trips. So I definitely can't wait to go back.
Did you go rifle or bow?
Yes, rifle. We went rifle this time. Normally, I love bow hunting. That's my passion. But we went rifles this time just because we didn't know what we were getting into. So we are like, let's make it a little easier on us. And I'm glad we did. We weren't into the rut yet, and it was early. And so the rifles definitely helped us out a lot. And yeah, it's just beautiful country. We saw so many.
What part of Montana?
Like north central.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right in the thick of the mountains.
Yeah. Well, it was a little.
Well, north central would be kind of east slope.
Yeah. We weren't quite there yet. But it was very wide open. Just coulees and very few trees. The coulees were wooded with the creek bottoms. But it was pretty open. A lot of sharp-tailed grouse. They were everywhere.
I was just going to ask you, were you out in sage country?
Yes, a lot of sage. Sharpies were everywhere.
Did you see any sage grouse?
No, not that I could tell, but no.
Okay.
I don't think we did. But yeah, it was.
I might have to hit you up for some sharp-tail pins come September, because I'm headed out to Montana this year. I couldn't go last year because I got the privilege of drawing a black bear tag, and I had to put that on the wayside.
Nice.
And
in Minnesota?
Yeah, no, Wisconsin. I had some struggles, and then I honestly don't know what happened, but I shot and I tracked a bear for a long, long ways.
Oh,
and
no.
Yeah, it was one of those very, very humbling moments as a hunter. And I've only ever lost a few animals in my lifetime, and this one ate me up for a bit. So
I bet.
It was not I knew from bear hunting in the past to not shoot a bow at a lying bear, one that's lying on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a 44 mag bolt action rifle, and he was 22 yards away. And I don't know. I've done this now a couple times, and the last two times I had tags, I passed on bears within 10 minutes of closing because I couldn't see my open sights, or I didn't feel comfortable the one time bow hunting. And I put a scope on the gun this year. I'm like, I'm just taking a rifle. I want to get this over with. I want to get a black bear. And this bear came in silent on like the third night. I had passed on two bears the opening night, and the second night I didn't see anything. And it was the dogs got let out early the last year, so I was sitting on a bait. So I was kind of a week behind schedule, and the time crunch up by me for bear hunting is pretty real. And if you don't get after them right away, the likelihood it just starts
Very
dropping.
slim, yeah.
And then they stop hitting the baits, and there's just a whole host of challenges. And when you got the dog guys that go first,
That's
I don't know,
tough.
they move them around, and
Yeah.
usually it's a good thing for me because I'm on private land, and they kind of seem to sanctuary up at our place. We run across them way more than I'd like to, just regular bow hunting. But for whatever reason, last year, we had some logging done on one of the parcels, and it just put enough pressure on that woods that they just were not comfortable ever last fall, which was really bummer that I drew that tag and punched
Shoot.
it. And then, yes, I had a few bears coming in, but the year prior, I had a couple buddies come up and hunt, and we had just a ton more bigger black bears that were around. And so it was kind of one of those things where it was really hard to go out and sit because you can't shoot a 400-pound bear if the 400-pound bear ain't coming into your bait site.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Or during the
you can't
day.
shoot the bear that's not
Yeah.
there, you know?
Yeah.
And so I had a couple 200-pound bears, and probably I had one decent bear that was between, I'd say 250 and probably 350 somewhere. Hard to really tell.
Mhm.
But he was a boar, and he was kind of the one I've been looking for because we've had some encounters with him. He hangs around all spring, and he's a big pain in my ass during turkey hunting.
Oh,
So I run
gotcha.
into him. I have two bears that I run into on a consistent basis, and a sow and this boar. And the sow is very fertile, and she has multiple. Well, she had 4 cubs the one year I
Oh, wow.
pulled the hammer on my 44 mag and was ready to. She was about to charge me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was the only time I've ever had that kind of significant run in where I've been ready. But I had another bear 2 years ago just eye me up. I was putting a trail camera on a stump, and he was at the edge of the cornfield, and I was at the edge of the cornfield too. And he peered through the last row, and I heard a stalk break, and I looked up, and I was about 5 feet eye to eye with this boar.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, he's very healthily scared of humans, but at the same time, he's super inquisitive and knows he's the king of the forest. So,
Wow. That's cool.
we've had Fish and Wildlife out at our neighbor's place, trapping them to try to relocate them because we've had a couple nuisance bears over the years. So it's kind of one of those things where I felt obligated to go out and hunt them, but at the same time, they just weren't there in the pattern that they have been in the past. So it was kind of a tough mental year for me. And then, third night in, I lay the hammer down on this bear that he came in, tipped the frickin' stump over, and that's what I heard. I never even heard him come in. He came in from behind me and off the cornfield. Should have known better. and he just tipped it over, and before I could even turn and get the gun up, he had already laid down. And I sat there for a couple minutes eyeing him up and trying to figure it out. I should have just done a little bit more center mass and tried to not shoot a little lower for the heart. That was probably my biggest mistake. But I think he had his paw that was facing me, his leg. I think he had it reared, and I used that as the belly line. And I honestly think I grazed in between his paw and his chest.
Oh, gotcha.
Because he didn't bleed. He didn't bleed like he'd been stuck by a 305 grain 44 mag bullet. I mean,
right.
This thing would have. I don't care what people say about black bears, and they don't bleed, but this thing would have bled like a stuck pig if I would have hit him good. Because it's basically like shooting him almost with a 50 caliber.
Right.
It's a big projectile. And yeah, it was just a bummer. One of those things where, as a hunter, you learn things still in the woods.
For sure. Yeah.
I hope your mule deer hunt didn't go like that.
No, it went really well. No, we both were able to punch our tags on some nice 3.5-year-old bucks, and
nice.
Yeah, it was crazy. I didn't expect it to go nearly that well. I was just fine with going out there and, learning the land and whatever. And it worked out great. So yeah, and I drew a bear tag last year as well, in Wisconsin, and I was able to capitalize on it, which was really cool. First time bear hunting, didn't know anything. I was bait sitting as well, and I think the dogs going first, like you said, worked in my favor, and I just had like 4 bears like randomly come. I was hunting public land, like a little chunk, and my boyfriend has hunted in this zone like several years and never had an opportunity, and that's what I was expecting.
I'm assuming, knowing kind of roughly where you're at, were you in Wisconsin zone D, C or D, because they changed the regs last year. You were in D, okay?
Yeah,
'cause that's where I hunted as well.
Okay.
So
yeah, yeah.
Was it previously C? Because they moved it down like almost 20 miles south.
Yeah.
So Highway 64 was the cutoff line. This past season is now moving forward. Highway 8 used to be the cutoff line. So everything south of Highway 8 over at least east of or west of 53 used to be Zone C. And I know a number of people who kind of used to hunt in Zone C because you used to be able to get tags relatively frequent in Zone C every other year, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not every day you see a big bear in Zone C. You see bears, but you just don't. There's certain areas that have some lot of agriculture land in Zone C, so it's spotty in comparison to north of Highway 8.
Yeah, very spotty.
So. Yeah. So how did you shoot a boar, sow?
I did. It was
you
a
had
boar.
4 bears coming in.
Well, 4 bears coming in. And this guy, I didn't sit very much. I think this was my second or third sit, and I got dropped off, and I heard something.
Question for you with that before you go into it. You said it was like your second or third sit.
Yeah.
Did you get after it right away when they allowed stump sitters to go, or did you kind of wait a little bit?
I did go right away. It was pretty early.
Yeah, that's why I was at, because I know with the weather and the way things kind of happened last year, they were pretty active, and then that first cold snap, which happened, I think like third or fourth or fifth day of the season, I want to say, they just really went goofy on me after that. And it's for me where I'm at, it was just very abnormal.
Right. Yeah. No, I had the same thing happening, and I had one bigger boar coming in all during the night. Like I never had a daytime picture of a bear for a long time, and that one never showed up. But then these 4 all of a sudden did. Just at night though, never in the day. And between my last sit and this sit where I actually killed it, random coming in the day on the trail camera. And so when I was sitting there, I didn't know that. And, here I am not expecting to see anything again. And I just heard something out in the swamp. It was actually a big splash. And I'm like, what the heck was that? I've never bear hunted before. So I was just new to everything, and I assumed it was a bear because I'm like, what else could do that? And then a little bit later, I see some black like through the trees. I'm like, oh my God, like it was a mirage. Like I couldn't believe it. And then here it came, and I'm just like in shock the whole time. And the first decent shot I had, I took it, and then it ran about 40 yards, but I couldn't see if it was, down or not, and I couldn't hear, and I never did hear the death moan, I don't think. But I see that, all the time on hunting shows and everything, and I really didn't hear that, so I didn't know what happened. And then a little bit later, another bear comes in and hits the bait. He actually, he went around me and made it to the bait, and I think he actually found my dead bear, but he still came into the bait. So I got to sit there and watch him, and then called my boyfriend. He came, and I was like, I don't know what happened. And he found the bear like right away. So it was crazy. Nice. One of the craziest experiences I've ever had. Still can't believe it
Yeah,
happened.
I had a couple guys up 2 years ago, and one of them, it was his first bear hunt, and it was a father-son deal, a friend of mine and his kid. And, the old man had shot a few bears before, so he was kind of just holding out and hoping one of the bigger ones that we had on camera was coming in. And the kid was kind of holding out the first couple nights too. They had seen a few bears, and mostly your standard Wisconsin black bear, and he it was kind of funny. The last night they were up, he shot one, and he called that, because I was up there. They called me, hey, we shot, and I heard the death moan, and he wasn't sure if he saw it go down, and well, you're on an oak ridge in there, and we went 200 yards, you can see it pretty much, and
Right.
and so we get in there, and his old man's still in the tree because it wasn't closing time yet. I bring over my cart to haul this bear out, and we're in the woods talking by the tree stand, and he was telling me what happened and all that, and all of a sudden this big old stick breaks about 50 yards from us, and here's a bear coming into the bait, and that damn bear watched us for about 5 minutes, and finally he's just circled us kind of over the ridge, and then we popped out down on the hole, and so we had extracted the bear, and we're on the edge of a cornfield. I got my truck parked there. We're 75 yards from one of the stands and the bait site that he shot. Bear's propped up and ready for pictures, and the old man shows up, and the kid and the old man kind of crouch behind the bear, and I'm taking a picture, and all of a sudden I see 2 cubs walk out of the woods about 80 yards behind us.
Oh,
behind
gosh.
them, and the sow walks out. So here we had, this bear shot, another bear, and then a sow and 2 cubs all in this 80-acre woodlot and we had
Wow.
just extracted a bear out of there and everything. So they're interesting animals. Like when they don't care, they don't care.
Yeah.
But when they care, it's just crazy how they can go from, all nighttime to just boom like that. And all of a sudden they're eating and coming in during the day. So
It's
they
crazy.
do strange things. I've been hunting them a long time, and I've quasi guided guys for a number of years.
Oh, nice.
I've had opportunity. When I was younger, my mom's friend had a full outfit up in Ashland County. So I helped him out and kind of learned a few things. And, I've had property I've had friends who've gotten tags. Come on up, I'll bait for you, and so I've been around these things for a long while. And I last year was one of those years that was just like, I've put in countless hours for other people to get a bear. And I could not, for the life of me, strike up a flippin' bear. After I tried to get these bait sites going again after I had shot. I just let the woods go for a week and then came back in and really hounded it again. And every trick I tried, I could not get a bear to strike up for the life of me. That was just my luck, Yeah. What are you gonna do? And then of course I get back from Kansas in January, and I got 2 messages from 2 different folks. Hey, I got a bear tag this fall. And Wisconsin was nice enough to change the regs on guides this year, so I can legally guide this year in Wisconsin now, being a non-resident. So
Nice.
I'm probably going to have hopefully some success bear hunting this fall again, and I won't I won't be lucky enough to punch my tag.
Shoot. No.
It's just I think I think other guides can probably relate to that.
Yeah.
It's just when you get your opportunity, it's your opportunity, and you still have to deal with everything else that everybody else does. And sometimes it's even more difficult, because I was trying to guide musky fishermen too last fall, and balancing all that out with, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to get another black bear tag for a while. And if I do, I think I'm going to apply for way up north, and I'm going to hire somebody to do it because did you bait all yourself and all that?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a ton of work.
It's a lot.
A ton of work. If Wisconsin would allow you to bait a little bit more, in quantity wise, so you didn't have to frequent the bait site so much, it'd be better, at least from a work perspective.
Right.
But yeah, with the 10 gallons of bait regulation, you got 4 bears coming in, you got to be there every day.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not going to hold them.
Mm-mm. Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah. So you punched a tag out in Montana. You punched a black bear tag here in Wisconsin. Did you punch a whitetail tag too?
No, I didn't.
So you didn't have all of the trifecta of luck this year.
Not the trifecta. No,
Did you get out and hunt at least?
I did quite a bit, as much as I could. Bow hunting, anyways, and I hunted early, and we went to Montana and came back, and I kind of lost my drive a little bit, so I didn't go much, and then I went late season, and I just love going late season just because of the time of year. And but yeah, I just didn't have any luck, so that was kind of whatever. But
did they extend the season in the area that you hunt for whitetail? I know my zone, or at least the I guess you call it sub-metro zone where I'm at, Polk County was, I think, intensive harvest. They extended it all the way out to damn near January, end of January, I think.
Yeah, for here, I think it was early January. I can't remember the exact date, but yeah. So I hunted up until
I couldn't come to get in the tree stand in January. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I picked and chose the days that I went very carefully because I'm such a wimp in the cold, and so I just was a fair weather hunter at that time. But yeah, no luck there. But
yeah, we had I had a pretty interesting bow hunt last year. I do a rut camp every year, and depends on who shows up. A good friend of mine came up this past year, and he's been coming the last couple. And like me, I gave him my best stand, and like he did last year when I gave him my best stand, he shot a buck and shot pretty respectable buck. And yeah,
nice.
he has not shot big giant whitetails. So and for me, it's just kind of like, hey, if it's 3.5 years old, man, and you're happy with putting it on the wall, go right ahead. And for me, myself, I've shot a few that size. So, I'm trying to do a little better, and that's my own struggle. I don't ask that or expect that upon everybody, but we try to practice quality deer management as much as possible up at the farm. And
nice.
So he's killed 2 what I would consider quality deer management bucks, and of course he does it out of my best stand. And it's a good friend for you, though. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I look at that, and that's kind of why I became a guide. My old man would never give his buddy his best stand, and he's not a fishing guide, or a hunting guide. So it's just a different perspective, and I definitely enjoy watching my buddies be successful up north, and can definitely be just as happy as me shooting one. So
nice. That's awesome.
So yeah, we had one hanging, and then it was kind of funny. He shot this buck, and he's like, dude, you got to get over here. He goes, he went to look for his arrow, and buck went down. He saw it go down, and he went to go find his arrow, and this doe come charging in, and 3 bucks behind her. And one of them was bigger than the buck he shot. And he takes the deck, and he's like, get over here. So I'm on the other property. Yeah. So I got to clear a road and a 40 to get there. I just pile my shit in the backpack, and I start hustling, and I ended up sneaking in on this buck and this doe. Well, and the 2 other bucks I didn't see, but I drew back, and I ended up getting a shot off at this buck, and I thought it was 30 yards. He was like 38 yards, and just missed him underneath. But the way it all happened, it was a fluke to even get a chance at a buck like that on the ground. And it was the first time in my life I had ever spot and stalked more or less a whitetail.
Right.
and
That's cool.
gotten an opportunity to fly an arrow. So it was
Nice.
mission accomplished for me.
Yeah.
It's just I didn't have time to glass. I mean, I didn't have time to range it. I just had to. He came charging around a brush pile, and it was.
Got to take the opportunity.
I had an open shot, and he
Right.
stopped. I mean, he was charging. I was about to do the old hey, and to get him to
Right.
stop, and I was at full draw and swinging with him, and I guessed he was at 30, and it happened so fast. I guessed wrong, and that's just part of archery hunting. And
Right.
but yeah, last year was not a good year from a big game perspective and connecting for me. I had a lot of opportunity, but then after that, yeah, I hunted pretty hard for 2 weeks, and I passed on a couple smaller bucks and saw some giants, but never got another opportunity on one. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
We're getting down to the bare ends of the venison from 2 years ago in the freezer. So this year's going to be definitely doe harvest is going to be high on the priority list for early bow season.
Nice. That's awesome. Something to look forward to.
Well, we've definitely spent a little time bullshitting off topic, and I appreciate that because I didn't realize you killed a black bear last year. That's really cool. How big was it?
He weighed 203.
Oh, so he's a good bear.
Yeah,
that's for a first bear. That's better than the average black bear killed in the state.
Yeah, I was like beyond happy with it, and that was my first one, didn't, don't know anything. And yeah, it was just one of the craziest, coolest experiences I've ever had.
Last question before before we get into some fishing stuff.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the meat? And more specifically, did you do any bear steak?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I did some bear steak. I did a whole like bear ham. I follow Meat Eater a lot, and they had this recipe for like basically a Christmas ham that you take the whole one hindquarter.
Did it turn out?
It did. It was awesome. We brined it and smoked it, and it was
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was so good. Loved it.
Did you do any just straight up grilling it, kind of similar to beef?
Yes. Yeah, we did some of the loin that way and a couple steaks that way, and it's such a rich meat. It's crazy. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very rich, I thought.
It's super rich. I tend to, and it's just me, I can be picky, and one can choose what they like and what not. If I had the opportunity of taking a beef loin or a bear loin, I'm probably going to take that beef loin every day, because of the richness, and part of that's because I enjoy that kind of meal. I want to share with family or friends. And not everybody enjoys it, so it's not just me. There's a bigger dichotomy, I guess you could say, or paradigm to that decision. But it's a great meat for sausage, because of the fat content in it typically, and the oiliness.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that it smokes unbelievably well. That's how I prefer to have it, is either a real good homemade sausage or smoked, or there's a couple cuts that do well if you do like a crock pot style dish. But it's definitely something that if an average hunter has never had it before and they think they're just going to skin this thing out like a whitetail and eat a bunch of steaks and burger, they're going to be in for a little bit of a surprise. It's definitely got a different flavor to it.
Definitely. Yeah, I was pretty surprised as well, but I enjoyed it. It was really good. Yeah, still got a bunch left to go, but yeah, it was a lot though. I agree. Very rich, and I could only take so much, but at one time. But yeah, it turned out really good.
I would say that the best way I've ever had it was a good friend of mine made some bratwurst with it.
Yes, I did that too.
And they didn't add any pork. And they didn't have to.
Right.
Did yours turn out well?
It did, yeah. The brats are outstanding, and I didn't add any pork either, and they are so good. Some of the best brats I've had.
Yes. My dilemma was I had 8, and I only got to enjoy 3 because the dog got the rest.
Oh no.
Yes.
no.
And they were a gift to me from a friend. So it's not like you could just go pull another pack out of the freezer.
Crap.
And yes, like they were, if I had a fourth one, I could definitely confirm they were the best broth because I would have eaten a fourth one.
Right.
But yeah, no, I don't know how it happened, and it wasn't even my dog. It was my buddy's dog. And it's
Shoot.
another story for another time. But so really cool. I appreciate you sharing with us, myself and the listeners. I'm always excited to hear, especially when people get to knock something off the list that they've never done before and be successful at it. Especially when I wasn't successful at it last year. It's good to hear that you were.
Well, I didn't expect to be by any means. So
now that was my problem and the lesson I learned. I expected to be, and I took that for granted big time as somebody who spends a lot of time in the woods and somebody who should know better. I took that one for granted big time. That lesson learned. Humbling.
Right. Yes, I know. I totally know how you feel on other species.
Yeah. Did you have a humbling experience this year in whitetail woods? Is that where that's coming from?
Not this year, but many years in the past, I have had many humbling experiences.
I had one
Never
with
fails.
a very large whitetail this year that just straight out walked into my life. And at the moment that he busted me. And, it's just one of those that, and the only way he got there in life was because he's busted every hunter like that before.
Right.
Know? So
Exactly.
I was just the average statistic, but man, he was probably pushing 165, 70 inches.
Oh, wow.
Just a gigantic 10 with huge tines.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really nice to see on my new 32 acres. It just kind of roamed through during the rut. Didn't have many pictures of him, and I don't know where he lives, but I found out that my new place is a little bit, my neighbor, I started calling it I-94. Because it's just like, it's like a highway. They just kind of cruise through.
Nice.
They don't really stay too long, but we got a few does around, so it's nice. Yeah, it was really cool. That was my biggest dilemma last year with hunting, and probably why I didn't get anything is I bought land and was used to hunting at my other place and put in a bunch of time at my new place, and I didn't know how to hunt it. And,
right.
Yeah,
Figuring
learned
it
a lot.
out. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
It's just kind of how it goes. So really looking forward to this fall. So, but I'm even more looking forward to getting out and doing some fishing. So
Yes.
let's get into a little bit of why I had you on the show today.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome.
We got into a bunch of topics last time, and for the listeners, Kasey is responsible for the fisheries management from the Wisconsin DNR's perspective for my home, what I consider my home water, and Western Wisconsin. And I think you've said it earlier, but St. Croix, Pierce, and Dunn County?
Yeah, Western Dunn.
Yeah, Western Dunn. Okay. So really predominant, I guess, what would you say? Maybe I should ask the fisheries biologist instead of just make a make some kind of statement. What is the predominant fishing done by anglers in your area?
Yeah, in my area, I always try to compare to other biologist areas too, and compared to many other biologists across the state, I have predominantly trout water. I do have a few lakes, but compared to everybody else, I basically have none. But I just have a handful of lakes in St. Croix County that I manage, in Dunn County too. But a lot of trout water. But I also cover the St. Croix and the Red Cedar River within Dunn County. So a couple bigger rivers, but a lot of trout water, especially in Pierce and Western Dunn, and then a few in St. Croix too. But yeah, a lot of trout. That takes up the majority of our sampling season, is sampling those waters. So lots of trout.
So I was I was gonna be somewhat correct when I said that you predominantly trout water is what you manage, or the predominant makeup of what most anglers pursue in your area.
Correct.
And that specific area is all spring creek fed for the most part. Historically, we had got in the previous podcast, we had gotten into kind of the brook trout and stream restoration projects you had done on Katy Creek, and talked a little bit about Pine Creek and the brook trout aspects of things. Historically, this water was all brook trout water at one point before we introduced brown trout.
Correct.
Am I correct in saying that as well?
Yes. Yep. Brook trout are our only native inland trout species.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and I guess where my question lies with that is some of this water kind of not trout water historically, and because brown trout can survive in it, is it trout water today? Or was this all historically decent native brook trout habitat?
Yeah, a lot of it was historically native brook trout habitat, and then we kind of went through this cycle where, brown trout were brought over from Europe, introduced to a bunch of the streams, for angling opportunities, food sources, whatever. And
Is that around the same time like the rainbow trout were started to show up here as well?
yeah, probably a very similar time frame. And then like mid-century, things kind of got pretty bad in terms of habitat. Land use practices were pretty poor, a lot of logging, overgrazing. So a huge degradation of habitat, groundwater, infiltration was very poor, and a lot of the streams were a lot warmer. So that degraded a lot. And then, with CRP and some of these other programs, groundwater infiltration got better, water quality got better with Clean Water Act. So we saw a lot more spring influence and groundwater input in a lot of these streams. So they got colder. Now they're super cold and are able to support very high numbers of trout. Habitat is better than it once was. So we've kind of went through this cycle, and now we have a lot of trout water, a lot of cold spring groundwater influenced streams, and a lot of great trout resources because of that. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. And brown trout, they've been here since their introduction, and they're basically, a naturalized species now. And we manage for them alongside brook trout too. So
yeah, and on the last podcast we had talked about too the timber coulee strain of brown trout and some of the paradigms that exist today with management that didn't exist in studies that you guys are doing. What can you maybe update the listeners on from our last conversation that's kind of developed in the last, I guess we probably haven't touched base in maybe 6-9 months, somewhere in there?
yeah, for sure. So I'll just touch on the timber coulee strain. That's just basically a strain of brown trout that the DNR, collects those eggs from just south of us, down near the La Crosse area. So they're a wild strain of brown trout that we collect eggs from, and we use those eggs to stock around the state. So for example, in my area, I use those fish to stock in the Willow River, the Chimbel River, some of our other Class 2 rivers. They're a very vigorous strain of trout from what we've seen, from their ability to start naturally reproducing wherever they're stocked. From what I've seen, they tend to move around and kind of find desirable habitats. And more desirable streams than some of like the domestic strain brown trout that we sometimes stock in some streams. So very vigorous, great ability to naturally reproduce and naturalize populations. So Katy Creek was when I brought up the timber coulee strain, because in Katy, so Katy is located in northeastern Pierce County. In Katy Creek, we've seen this shift from historically strictly brook trout in that stream, and it's shifted to brown trout dominant in the past decade. Historically, 0 brown trout in there. All brookies, very high numbers of brookies. And in about 2005, the strain, so Katy Creek flows into the O'Galley River, and in 2005, that stocking strain was changed from domestics to the timber coulee. A few years later, they start showing up in Katy. Brown trout start showing up in Katy, and then they've just kind of exploded since then and taken over. And so that's one thing that we're still working on, is restoring the brook trout in Katy for many reasons. Katy is just a really important brook trout resource in the area for many reasons. I can get into that if you want me to, but Katy's a long story. So we're still continuing brown trout removal in there, which is going well. We're seeing a response out of the brook trout population. It's increasing more natural reproduction of brookies, which is great to see. And we've changed the stocking regime in the O'Galley too to help this out because of the connected water. So the O'Galley is hopefully going to switch to a brook trout stream with a few brown trout present here and there. So that's kind of our management goals for that watershed. But so far it's going well. Plan to continue that in the future as well. So,
And the O'Galley has water temps that can support brook trout.
yes, it does. We surveyed the O'Galley in 2019, and previously I had thought, that it was thermally challenged, and it's a class 2.
I definitely know from at least wading it. There's the areas that I've fished. There's a lot of silt in that particular stream. Now there's areas that they're a little bit more, I would call rocky, I guess, or gravelly. But
Right.
looking at it and looking at the topography of where it lies, it's definitely at the bottom of the valley. And then, talk about centuries long of farming practices and whatnot. It's been a few years since I've actually fished the O'Galley River, river. But the last time I remember it being very, very silty and mucky in comparison to, say, stretches of the Rush River or the Trimble, where, there's large hatches and freestone bug hatches. And am I wrong in that kind of statement?
Yeah, no, that's pretty correct. Yeah. Once you get up towards the Spring Valley area, that's when you hit the more freestone, rocky, gravelly substrate, and then you move down, and it doesn't take long, and you're into like sandstone dominated geology, a lot of, sand silt. There's a lot of degraded habitat down there, a lot of overgrazing. So the habitat isn't, as ideal or preferred in a lot of the O'Galley, but the thermals. So we did a study in 2019 of the entire O'Galley, sampled it all the way down to County D, I believe was our lowest site. So pretty far down that we found brook trout throughout, brown trout too, but we found brookies throughout. And we were sampling in mid-August, and the thermals were actually pretty good in the low 60s. So,
Wow.
Yeah, it
That's
was impressive.
surprising.
Yeah, I was very surprised as well. And the upper O'Galley, upstream of Spring Valley Reservoir, that is kind of a little case study. So previously there were brown trout there. My supervisor, in between my predecessor retiring and me getting hired, he started stocking feral strain brook trout in that upper portion there. And brown trout, don't know what happened, but there is not a brown left up there, or that we found in that section of river. It's all brook trout, likely as a result of this feral strain stocking, and they're naturally reproducing up there now, which is crazy and very unexpected, but it's awesome to see. So it's kind of a cool little case study that hopefully Katy and potentially the O'Galley can look like, in a few years if we keep this up. We'll see. I don't know. Katy's different, and it's very rocky. It's got great habitat. It's got over 4 miles of habitat restoration work done on it. So it's a very ideal habitat. So it's going to be more of a challenge, but we're going to try to hang in there and get the brook trout population restored and established again.
Now, when we had talked last, you guys had just established, I think, a newer easement on Katy.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Has there been any more expansion?
Yeah. So Katy, we did get their 3 little easements downstream of County P by Elmwood. So it totaled about 3,500 feet of stream, and we actually did a restoration project on that and finished that last field season. So that's totally been restored down there.
So that's all that down by that farm and pasture land?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a farm down there, if I recall.
They do row crops. Yeah,
Okay.
they don't do any grazing, but the one side is row crops, and the other side it's like this guy's yard and a little wooded area. So, but it was pretty bad. There's a huge resource concern and really bad banks, and they were some of the worst banks I've seen. So it was a really good project. Turned out really good.
I got to give a little plug out to Zach and the folks at Trout Routes. I'm using their app right now to talk about, and they've got a really nice app that overlays the trout water and the easements
nice.
and compiles some stream flow data. And they're just kind of like the Onyx of trout fishing. They're pretty cool.
Awesome.
And Zach,
You
the
have to check that out.
founder, yeah, he's right here in the Twin Cities. He's a pretty cool guy. We've definitely been in touch. I think we're going to try to get out and do some fishing here for both of our companies shortly.
Nice.
Before my season kicks off. So, but no, they've got a nice product. You should check it out.
Yeah, I'm
I'd be
writing that
curious
down
what
right
your
now.
opinion. It's called Trout Routes.
Perfect.
And if you like it, I can probably hook you up with the guy who started it. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, sounds good.
So they just pull in all your data more or less. So
Right.
what's available. But anyways, back to Katy Creek. So things are going well. The O'Galley sounds like is a better resource for this effort on Katy Creek than once believed, which gives good hope for what you guys are doing on Katy. Anything from, I know you guys liberalized the harvest last year on Katy Creek.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm assuming continue. Is there any change to that this upcoming season?
Yeah, so I'm taking it a step further and further liberalizing the brown trout harvest in Katy and Pine Creek. So right now it's the 8-inch min, 3-bag, species combined. Now I'm at the next spring hearings, not this one in 2023, but 2024, proposing to change the regs to brown trout. Well, and it includes rainbows too. The regulation does, but brown trout, 5-fish bag limit, no minimum. Brook trout, all catch and release. So that's going to go into effect hopefully after that spring hearings. And once the brook trout population hopefully rebounds enough, we can take that reg off and allow people to catch some more brook trout again. But hopefully this will help. Most people that I've encountered are mostly catch and release trout fishermen, but I've been trying to get people, I've been trying to advertise, like, if you want to catch and keep some browns, go to Katy or Pine. And Pine Creek is just insane this last year with brown trout. That was our highest densities that we found in my area.
Really?
It was 10,000 brown trout per mile. That's total.
Come on.
It was
in
insane.
Pine Creek?
Insane. In Pine Creek. Yep. It was crazy.
Now, if an angler, let's talk about, do you mind switching gears?
Yeah.
Is there anything with Katy that you want to say before we switch gears to Pine Creek?
No, totally fine. We can go to Pine.
No, we talked about both these creeks on the last podcast a little bit.
Yeah.
And I do want to, there's a couple other creeks. I actually wrote down another river here too I want to talk about. So let's kind of try not to go down too many rabbit holes. You'll have to hold me back a little bit potentially. But Pine Creek, I've personally tried to approach Pine Creek a couple times, and I've always struggled to, and again, this is for really more of a lack of effort and time when you consider where Pine is and what you have to drive by from where I'm at to get to Pine.
Mhm.
I've it's never drawn me in to fish it, and part of that, I guess, is because the access on really from 35 up to Highway E, to me, that the creek disappears, and I just don't understand the lay of the land. So when you guys surveyed, how far up the two branches of these streams is that 10,000 trout per mile? Is this Pine Creek is only, what is it? The one branch is maybe a mile and to maybe 3 miles. The other one's maybe what, 5?
Yeah, I think it's about 5. But yeah, so we're surveying like in the middle of the DNR land up
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
Like County A is where we are sampling, where we're
Sure.
getting
Okay.
all of these. So yeah, that's where we're at. Just all of the restored area. You can
Yeah.
basically assume that it's similar densities.
Yeah. One,
Or
and
AA, sorry, double A.
there there's a substantial amount of land up there, and um I've fished it a couple times, and mostly it's been when I didn't like what was going on like the Rush or one of these other bigger, more attractive rivers for some of the fishermen over there. And I wandered down to Pine, and it's very conditional to, at least it's not a great, for me, it was a very difficult winter stream to fish when I was there the last winter time I fished it. And then as the season progresses, I don't know how well you guys maintain the shore banks down there because I haven't been down there in a while, but I know it's a very skinny creek with
Yeah.
very deep project work done. So it's difficult to
Yes.
wade.
Yeah.
And so it's a challenging creek to fish. Are there any restrictions from an artificial or conventional fisherman? Can they use live bait in that stream?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Hmm.
What about Katie? That was the one thing I was going to ask you too.
Yep,
Is
same
there?
deal. No
Okay.
restrictions as far as that goes. But yeah, Pine, I've gotten that comment from a lot of people. It's really hard to fish. I've tried to fish it and I haven't had much luck. But yeah,
I
it's
see
so
plenty of them
tough.
in there, but they're
Yeah, you can
very
see them.
spooky.
Yeah, super spooky. Like you said, it's very narrow, very deep. Um, and there's tons of lunkers. I've heard people say, and maybe it's true, that there's a ton of lunker structures in there, and that
Mm-hmm.
when people walk on the banks, like the trout can like hear that echo, through the lunkers because you're walking on top of the lunkers, and maybe that's true. I don't know, but I have not heard of many people having a lot of luck on Pine. We do mow it. We mow a fishing path every year on one bank.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, and then this year actually we're mowing the whole thing, like the whole prairie area. So it'll be really good access around like July if you want to go down
Okay.
there for that. But then it's wide open and there's no cover, so it's hard. It's really
Pick your
hard.
days. Yeah.
Right.
It's definitely one of those creeks that's always intrigued me, and that I've felt that I've underserved it from an effort perspective. I've always gone, there's certain days, where you have difficult conditions and you kind of feel like you have to become a fish ninja.
Right.
And that one, you just have to be a fish ninja all the time. It
Right.
seems like is kind of how I've categorized it.
I agree.
I've fished a few other smaller creeks that fish a hell of a lot easier than that one does. So yeah, it's a challenging creek, but it's good to hear, and it's good to advertise at least that, from the DNR's perspective and your long-term management goals, people can go out, get an opportunity to fish with worms and something that's a little easier for somebody to introduce somebody into trout fishing. harvest some fish and kind of help you out as well. It's good to understand those dynamics, because I think there's such a blanket statement today when it comes to fish harvesting, and depending on what circles you're in, I mean, you get shamed for pulling a musky out and keeping it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to look at a lot of fellow musky guys and shame on you for, being a keyboard warrior, because ultimately at the end of the day, you want to see the fish go back. Well, I think that's more of a selfish perspective at root than it is a conservation perspective. The DNR sets the conservation aspects of these waterways and considers harvest as a major tool.
Yes.
And there's a lot of social public opinions and opinions that really aren't necessarily relevant. And I think we do more damage than good in the fishing community sometimes. So
Yeah.
I'd like to have you on, straighten these things out a little bit when it comes to at least understanding what your goal is behind having some of these regulations. And, when you talk about catch and release, I look at musky guys and trout fishermen, and then throw the fly fishing dynamic on top of that. And it overwhelmingly presents as a catch and release kind of gig. And I think people have to look at it a little bit differently than that. And there is an aspect of taking some fish out of the system and doing your part that I think we all have a little bit of a responsibility of.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up, because talking trout anyway, is not necessarily musky, but a lot of fish species are highly density dependent. So there's only so many resources in a water body to go around. And just, think of Pine Creek. So very small stream. And there's 10,000 fish per mile. They're all competing with each other for the same resources. So what we found too, I can, send anybody's data that wants to look at it. It's composed of very small fish, less than 8 inches, probably 80% of our fish were. And that's also due to some very good year classes the past couple years. But all of those fish are competing with each other, so they're not growing at nearly a rate or a desirable rate that, some streams with lower densities are growing at. So there's just too many. And so for people to go down and catch some, it's awesome. It's helping the fishery. It's helping the people. It's helping me. It's helping the brook trout. So by no means I'm saying I hope hundreds of people go down there and harvest fish, or that's why we have regulations, right? Like, that's our tool. Our regulations are in place to prevent overharvest, hopefully. And in some cases it can happen. Overharvest can happen. There has to be a good balance, but by no means is it bad to harvest a trout. Trout grow fast, die young. They're going to die anyways. So you might as well keep them.
I mean, and speaking of that, like, when you guys set these regulations and make these considerations, you just said by no means are you saying and hoping that, X amount of people go down and harvest all these trout. How do you come up with that figure? From a harvest perspective, when you have a waterway or a body of water or a riverway, and you have this figure, and now you have presumably, well, let's just say 100,000 trout in Pine Creek, and you didn't anticipate or want that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you calculate how many fishermen could potentially come out and harvest that limit, and what that max number of individuals is, and how close do you find some of your targets, I guess, on some of these?
Yeah, so it's really hard, especially in trout streams, to do that. But trout in this area are just so productive that, in a couple years, you're going to have a whole new year class of fishable sized fish.
Sure.
So I would probably give the example of a fishery in a lake a little bit more.
Well, and that's kind of what I had more in my mind than say necessarily a trout stream. But I know you were mentioning you guys were doing some sampling on and study on Cedar Lake.
Yeah.
And Cedar Lake in I guess it would be northern St. Croix County,
Right.
was doing very, very well.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're going to potentially change regulations there, or any lake because of that condition. So you set a figure for a number of anglers that I'm assuming are going to harvest the limit, and that's kind of how you figure out. Does the DNR have a baseline of, okay, well, there's a potential of X amount of anglers fishing this throughout the year figure, and then there's a calculation of how many anglers might actually procure their limits, and then how many times they might do that, and then you kind of calculate a management plan for that body of water that way, or is it
Yes.
based on the fish figures? And it's kind of, I'm just general answer. I was just kind of understanding how the DNR goes about doing that, maybe, and hopefully that might help clarify some of these other issues that with people with fishing limits and
Yeah.
things like that and keeping fish.
Great question. It depends on both the fishery and the anglers, and the harvest. So we conduct creel surveys. In the ceded territory, they're conducted a lot more often than they are in the area that's not ceded. So from those creel surveys, we can get an idea of how many anglers are there, how many people are harvesting fish, what species are harvesting. So we can calculate harvest rates and catch rates, and we can project those onto the fishery. And so the fishery we also survey, on a 4 to 8 year rotation. So like cedar, we survey it every 4 years, and we can get a really good handle on the current fish population based on our survey. So we can conduct population estimates or relative abundance of each species. And then, from that we can say, okay, there's this many walleye in here right now, and this is our harvest rates and our number of anglers. So we can do a bunch of modeling based on the fishery, so we can calculate recruitment rates, mortality rates, growth rates. And from that, we can say, okay, there's going to be this much exploitation by anglers. And we can actually plug in different regulations within our models and say, okay, this is going to be the yield. And we don't want this money to be taken out because this is going to happen. So it can get very complicated, but we try to use that as much as we can to put these regulations on. So as far as trout, we could do the same thing with trout. But like Pine Creek and Katy Creek, where we have these like specific management objectives, and Pine Creek, it's like I could put a 20 fish bag limit of brown trout on there, and it still probably wouldn't reduce the brown trout population. But the goal there with Pine and Katy is to help us, let anglers aid us in reducing brown trout populations, and, letting them go to, okay, you can have, a meal out of this. You can get down there and it's worth it for people to harvest them. You can keep 5 rather than, just a couple. So that's kind of the goals there. By no means,
So
we would ever expect over harvest for that.
well, with that and your objectives of changing Pine Creek to more brook trout predominant, which it historically has been, at what point does the DNR step in and do something about it? And if you do, what does it look like?
Yeah, so with Katy,
and is that even something, on the table and that you guys are discussing to do something?
Definitely. We as a fishery manager, as on my management tools that I can influence harvest through regulations. I can stock it. We can do habitat management, or in Katy's case, we're doing a little bit of everything, including brown trout removal. So in Katy, we are going in ourselves with our electrofishing gear and physically removing all the brown trout that we capture. So that's kind of an extreme action that we're doing on Katy, along with changing stocking and changing regulations. So Pine Creek, it's kind of a different deal because brown trout are in such higher numbers than they were in Katy. We kind of got a little bit of jump in there, and Pine Creek is just, I don't want to say too far gone, but it would be a huge effort to do that or attempt that. And right now, I don't see it as doing a brown trout removal as being first of all able to do it and then having a good enough impact. Whereas Katie, we have a handle on it, and I think we're able to tip the scales, and I don't think we could do that in Pine Creek. So that's kind of where we're at, just because of the state of things.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. How much of it, and again, it's one of these, just, I'm a fisherman and I see things as I kind of see them, willing to call them like I call them,
yeah.
It's such a proximity to the Rush River.
Yes.
Do you believe that that is a significant factor in why there's been a decrease in brook trout, moreover than habitat loss?
Yes. I speculate, and I feel like it's probably true that the brown trout in Pine Creek probably came from the rush. In the winter, whenever water gets cool enough in the Mississippi, brown trout kind of go out into the rush and, for whatever reason, move up.
And
into
we
Pine
talked about a
Creek.
little bit of this, and that
Yeah.
I just want, I don't remember if we touched base on exactly these specifics last time, and I wanted to get your thought on that, because I would think if there is that many, they're coming from somewhere, and there's a pretty damn good chance that there's some pretty good big brown trout that have pretty well adapted to that lower life in the warmer water close, and I would assume they've migrated.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have, the ideal habitat that Pine Creek is in certain retrospects, that you have a very, very, very young, small class of brown trout in there that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some.
I can see how the tables have set for that, I guess.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we have to take into account when we're doing this. Like, I have control over what's stocked into the O'Galley, so I can change that to try to help Katie. But Pine Creek, with its proximity to the rush, and if we did something in there, more would probably just come, just because of that connection. So it's like, we can't.
Yeah, I would think you'd have to start on the rush to change more of the rush, and I don't know if that's even a feasible management goal. So if that's not, then you kind of have to almost look at Katie or Pine Creek as, well, it's going to fall into the same kind of management plan that, or management that the rush is eventually going to.
Right, exactly. I would never want to alter the rush, in any way, unless improving it, because it's a brown trout fishery with brook trout scattered throughout and in some of the tributaries, and that's
I've caught some dandy brooks in the rush.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's a great fishery, and
It is.
It's good all the way down.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to say for sure, for those listening, that since we brought up the rush, no, the rush is managed. That's our goal, is for, a great brown trout fishery with the brookie scattered.
Did you guys survey that this last year?
Yeah, we did, actually.
How did that go?
Very well. Yeah, we've surveyed it pretty much from the top to the bottom, from Centerville all the way down to Maiden Rock, and sampling went well. The rush is it's a bigger river, so it requires a lot of staff to do any one site. So it was a struggle to try to get, that much staff in, to survey all of the sites, because it was a lot. But we did it, and we got some really good data. And the fishery was just outstanding, as it was everywhere else pretty much in this area last year. It was, past couple years have just had huge year classes, and fish numbers were through the roof everywhere for all size classes. So it was really impressive. Really impressive to see.
And are you seeing an improvement in water quality and overall trend in this? Because I think that would also improve the bug hatch and the bugs that are living in the system. That would also be able to support what you're seeing in trout numbers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, water quality has been great. Even with our very warm, dry summer last year, the rush stayed cool as it needed to be for trout to survive. We never sampled when I think our highest temperature we encountered during our survey was like 62 or 63, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. So thermals were great, water quality was great. And I think those couple huge year classes this year in 2020, they were just huge. And I think that's due to more stable springtime water flows during the past couple years is what I think those year classes, why they were so good. 2019 was kind of a low year. Natural reproduction was pretty low. So you have these fluctuations, and which is good because, you don't have many trout one year and you have a lot. So you have, some good year classes, and those year classes that are a little bit smaller, they grow pretty well. So you kind of have, a nice balance. But yeah, the rush looked great, as well as all the other streams in the area too. Very high trout numbers.
Well, I could go on for hours with this whole stuff. So we better kind of keep things a little bit focused. I should ask, we have an opportunity and I need to get this in. Do you need a break? We should take a quick one.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Because you listen to this outstanding podcast, I'd like to invite you to check out another one that you may like as well. I'm Tom Rowland, host of Saltwater Experience television show and the Tom Rowland podcast. Each week, I drop 3 brand new shows, including interviews with extreme performers like the true giants of the fishing world, authors, athletes, Navy SEALs, and regular people with extraordinary stories to learn what took them to the top and how we can apply those same principles to our lives. How-to episodes are on Tuesday, and tune in for Physical Fridays to make sure you're on the path to catch a tarpon when you're 95 years old or be at your very best tomorrow. So search for the Tom Rowland Podcast where you listen, or go to tomrowlandpodcast.com and come on over.
Okay, I'm back.
Rock on.
Awesome.
It's been actually very handy to have a little break in the show, especially when you start chatting and you don't even realize you've been at it over an hour. So
I know, that's crazy. It's going good.
And then we were at it before that. So
right. Very cool.
So I want to give you an opportunity to tie up any loose ends with the brook and brown trout conversation we had, and then I do have 2 quick overviews on 2 other streams. And
cool.
Then I want to touch base on Sturgeon and the St. Croix. And if we could maybe close out with a little bit of what your opinion is for listeners and anglers looking to maybe hit the Red Cedar this year.
Okay. Awesome.
So does that work for you? Do you have enough time for that?
Yeah, I should. I think so.
Okay. And if we need to move through it, just let me know when you got to run if we get a little long-winded.
Okay.
Feel
Sounds
free.
good. Awesome. Yeah. So as far as like the brook and brown trout stuff, I feel like a ton of presentations about it. And I guess I would just one of my theories is that the underlying geology of the area, my area is very distinct between like Pierce and Western Dunn County, with sandstone and limestone geology types. And I feel like in my presentations, that's what I've talked about. And I just would like to clarify, for anybody listening that has listened to those, that what I'm getting at with that is that I think that may help to explain some of these trout responses to different types of disturbances, like the habitat work or stocking, or a water quality change where those species have flipped from brook trout to brown trout dominant streams. Basically, what I'm getting at with that is that the underlying geology can explain maybe if that's going to happen and why that's going to happen, but the actual mechanism that causes the flip, the species flip, we don't actually, I have some theories, but I don't actually know. So I just wanted to clarify that that's what I'm getting at in my presentations. And we are still actively managing for brown trout. Brown trout are going to be here in more streams than brook trout are mid-century, or is predicted to be. So definitely continuing to manage for brown trout, but we're just doing these, or taking these kind of more extreme management actions in a few of these streams like Katy, because it's some of the last fishable size brook trout water left in the county. And it's just super important to try to conserve those types of populations. So that's why we're taking those management goals, or those management actions there. But brown trout, they're here too, and we're definitely managing those, and trying to enhance those fisheries as well. So I just wanted to clarify that if anybody's listening that has listened to those.
Yeah, and I think you get a smattering of different people who have a bunch of different opinions on the subject, and that's good. Yeah. And it's bad at some retrospects, just because it drives conversations like this one to a bunch of different rabbit holes that don't necessarily lend themselves to a full, DNR position on management, or people understanding the basics of it. And I think that's a good clarification. So
cool. Thanks for the opportunity to do that too. This is
and
a good platform.
It's important. It is, because I'd be really ticked off if I had an opportunity, and I think we all should feel this way, to save some brook trout water, and fishable brook trout water, and the kind of water that a guy could go out and catch a couple brook trout and make a meal out of it once in a while. Mm-hmm. That type of water is hard to come by in those counties. It's predominantly brown trout, and it'd be nice to save that. And if we can try to strive to do that, and there's realistic goals, we should. And getting an understanding that that's not the goal for every fishery in that area, right? But that we can do it on this specific one. And I think that's important for the public to understand the discernment in how we got there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that was a great summary of what I was trying to get at. That was perfect.
So let's I always like to highlight a few different things than maybe we've touched on in the past, or maybe that you really have had an opportunity to talk to folks about. Do you manage the whole you said, is it the western half of Dunn County?
Yeah, everything west of the Red Cedar.
Is that north of Highway 64?
Yes.
You go all the way up to the Barron County border?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the South Fork of the Hay River? Mm-hmm. Is that managed by you?
Yep, it is.
Can you give anglers a little highlight on that river? I have not made time to get over there and fish it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely worth it. So western Dunn County is mostly all brook trout water, which is very cool, but it's just a very different habitat than Pierce County. But if you get up, to South Fork of the Hay, into Barron County, it's very it's more similar habitat, not gradient. It's kind of lower gradient, but it's got a lot of rock, gravel, freestone substrate, which is really cool. But it's a great fishery, great fishable size water. It's bigger water, compared to the rest of the western part of the county. and it is somewhat popular. People, opening day, there's probably going to be a car at every bridge that I've seen, but it's more popular than like Wilson, and maybe not Gilbert. Gilbert's popular too, but South Fork of the Hay, it's a great brook trout fishery. All brook trout, really nice size structure, but there is quite a bit of a harvest, I think, from what we have seen. But it's pretty outstanding. Super productive fishery. It's a class 1. It does get into class 2 water once you get down towards south of Connorsville, but there's a lot of access. So now I've did a lot of easement acquisition in that area for the past couple years. So I think the road is 1330th. So all the way from 1330th to the Barron County line is public easement. So a ton of access, walk-ins, parking lots. It's a great opportunity and great fishery. There's some really nice brook trout there. Not that I want to send everybody there, but it's a really nice experience.
Well, and I think the reason I asked you about it is because I've driven past all of my normal haunts over in Pierce County, and I'm now located a little bit north of where I used to be. So I'm looking at different water and trying to reach out, and there's a high density of trout water in that particular area. Now there's a lot of very small streams, but there's a lot of options is kind of my point. So even if you go and kind of shoot for the Hay, South Fork of the Hay, you've got, what is it? Torgelson Creek.
Yeah. Torgerson.
You've got Connors Creek. And again, I'm just looking at a map. That's a trout, map that's got trout streams on it. Some of these, the state marks as trout streams, but are they truly fishable trout water? Some of it's not. And that's just the realistics of it. There's protected spawning water and things like that that's included in this as well, I'm assuming. But you've got Bowling Creek is another one. So there's a plethora of water within 15 minutes if you shot for, say, the central part, like a 64 in the Hay Creek, South Hay Creek. So it's a good area. And you might be sending people to one creek, but I'm the type of person that's looking at this going, well, there's a bunch of creeks I got to check out.
Yeah,
so
there is.
There's a significant amount of water is kind of my point. And it's just an area that I think a lot of people that are Twin Cities anglers don't bother to look at, and probably should when you consider that Highway 35 is 4-lane all the way out to New Richmond, and then only got about 15 minutes of 2-lane to get to that particular area. So it's a much closer than people think when they look at a map and go, oh, well, I can get out here on 94 pretty quickly. So I was kind of curious, is there any brown trout in Hay?
No. So we have one trend site, gonna be 2 that we monitor every year, and it's all strictly brook trout. So stocking of brown trout did occur in the lower reaches, like south of Connorsville, back in the day, like the past couple decades. But that's since been stopped, and we haven't picked up a brown in our surveys recently. So it's pretty much strictly brook trout. If you go down, not saying that you might pick up a brown or see a brown way down there, but it's probably going to be like few and far between.
Sure.
But yeah, the South Fork of the Hay, Vance Creek is another one up there. That's a little bit bigger, but it's got a lot of nice brook trout in it, but it's so hard to fish. It's just pretty much all wooded corridor and very low gradient, sandy, hard to wade. But it's got some nice
Sure.
brook trout in there. So if people, if you could figure out how to do that, I haven't figured it out yet. I know there's a couple people in Trout Unlimited that like those kind of spots where it's really tough. But yeah, there's some good resources up there for sure.
I definitely prefer the stuff that deters most guys.
Nice. That's awesome. Very cool.
Well, yeah, I do this because I like solace and I like finding new places. So it's always interesting to see. But I will tell you, there's days that I don't want to be casting a fly rod and that stuff because I don't want to be casting a fly rod, period.
Right.
And when you get in those tight quarters, you can get pretty, you can have some bad experiences quick, I guess you could say. I've had them.
Gotcha.
Too many trees some ways.
Right.
It was early on when I was a young fly caster, but I still as a novice at best, I guess you could say, still have them. So,
yeah, me too, for sure.
If you were going to highlight anything else from a fisheries perspective that maybe guys looking for a little piece of quiet and it's on the map, but he's just looking for reassurance that there's decent fish there, not necessarily looking for any little hidden gem. But I've started to see a lot of anglers in Pierce County, and if somebody wanted to go a little further, one that's always kind of intrigued me, and I know you guys done some work on it, Plum Creek. And then I think this other one's outside of your area. Is the headwaters of Arkansas Creek in Pierce County, or is it considered to be in Pepin County?
Yeah, mostly just in Pepin.
Okay.
So that's like a little out of my
area.
But Plum Creek is really nice. It's class 1 in Pierce County, a mixture of brook trout and brown trout, and it's a really nice fishery, good size water. Anywhere from like around Plum City area down to, the Pepin County line. That's where I can speak from, but it's some really nice water. Trout numbers were outstanding this year. So, and like you said, we did that restoration project.
Yeah. How recent are some of, I know there's, it's there's I don't know, maybe a half a dozen properties down here that you guys have done. And some of these are pretty recent.
Yeah, we've only did one project on Plum, but we have other easements that we haven't did habitat projects on.
Okay.
Yeah, so the project that we completed, I think it was completed in 2019 or maybe 2020. We got done with it. But it
was recent. I know that.
Very recent. I just get my years mixed up. But yeah, that's about 3 miles south of Plum City. And it's a huge easement. It's like 10,000 feet of stream. So that's a great one. And then upstream from there to Plum City, if you look out and if you got, this trout routes or any kind of map, you can see we've got quite a bit of easement between there and Plum City too.
Yeah. So other options, do you see much angling pressure on Plum in comparison to some of the other stuff?
In comparison to like the Rush or the Trim Bell, even quite a bit less, except for the habitat project. I know that's been very popular, just because access is really good right now. Got a parking lot there, and I know there's been a lot of people fishing it, but on those other easements, I would say very few people. You're probably not going to run into anybody. So yeah, that's a good option to get away from the crowds. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's hang up the trout stuff, and unless there's anything else you got to say, otherwise,
yeah, that's fine. I could go on and on, but that's fine.
Yeah. Let's talk quickly about sturgeon and some of the other studies that you guys are doing on the St. Croix, because I think you have discovered a couple rare species, I believe, and there's some new stuff that you had mentioned to me in our pre-call here that I wanted to hear about. We didn't get to talk about it then, so
Yeah.
let's dive into it if you got a few minutes yet.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so we got a couple new projects on sturgeon that we kind of started last year. So the biologist in Eau Claire, he covers the Chippewa River, and he started this acoustic tagging project on sturgeon to try to get a better handle on movements and connectivity of populations. So between the Chip and the Mississippi, Red Cedar, St. Croix, and even the Black River. So basically, we've deployed these acoustic receivers at specific locations in each river, and then we can tag fish with these transmitters that have to be implanted into the fish. So anytime they pass by a receiver, it picks that particular fish up, so we can tell what day, what time a specific fish was, at these locations. So it's pretty cool. And so we've got three receivers in the St. Croix, several in the Chippewa, a couple in the Red Cedar, Black River. So, and then there's a ton in the Mississippi between us and Minnesota. So we can kind of track these fish that we tag pretty well.
I have to give you a little shit.
Okay, go for it.
You didn't grow up in Minnesota.
No.
But damn, you sounded like you did. When you said Minnesota, oh yes, you had the soda.
Oh wow, dang!
I heard it. For what you grew up in the Northwest, right?
Well, Southern Illinois, actually. So.
Oh, that's right.
It finally happened. I'm like, no.
I have to give you a little crap because you're even in Wisconsin, and I go, whoa, I heard it.
Oh no. I will not listen to this part again because I can't believe I finally got a little bit of that accent picked up.
It was a little bit there.
Darn it. That's hilarious.
As a Wisconsinite in Minnesota, I've caught myself doing it too. So
yeah,
I'm only giving you crap because I've been there.
Right. Oh, I never thought it would happen. But yeah, that's awesome.
Sorry to throw you off your game there, but
no, totally fine.
We were talking about sturgeon surveys and acoustic tags.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask a specific question with that, actually.
Yeah, cool.
So when it has this type of acoustic tagging and this method of collecting data, has this been used before in sturgeon or any fish on this part of the St. Croix?
For sure.
In your water?
For sure. Well, we haven't. In Wisconsin, we haven't tagged sturgeon on the St. Croix, but Minnesota staff, they have these same types of tags in a bunch of other species too, and they do have some in sturgeon as well. But catfish, they've got them in a ton of species, and they have a huge array of these receivers, way more than we do, which is really cool because it's such good data, and we can get is the St. Croix River, the sturgeon there connected to the Mississippi? Is the Chip connected to the Mississippi? Should we be managing these populations, looking at them as a whole rather than, just the sturgeon population in the St. Croix or just in the Chip? So that's kind of the goal of this. So it's really cool. So I didn't have a background in doing fish surgeries before this, so that was a learning curve for me, but I was able to implant 6 fish in the St. Croix last year, along with all of our other sampling. We handled over 50 fish, but I've been trying to put these tags in some of the bigger fish over 50 inches. So we got that done in 6. We're going to continue it this year, hopefully get about 30 sturgeon implanted. But it's pretty cool data so far. I know one of the fish that I tagged is hanging out in Pepin. Maybe it's still hanging out in Pepin. And then some are still hanging anywhere, from St. Croix Falls area, Interstate State Park area. Some went down in Linda Lake, St. Croix. So it's pretty cool what we've seen so far in just a very short period of time. So I'm excited for continuing this project. So that's something big we got going on in the St. Croix that we'll continue. But
When
very cool
did
stuff.
when did that start for you guys?
So last year was the first year
cool.
that I got fish tagged. So very new.
What was the biggest one you guys pulled out?
Oh, I think it was right at 60 inches. We saw a much bigger one. So where we sample, it's like right below the dam, St. Croix Falls Dam. We have special permissions from Excel to get down there, and we have to wear, it's really sketchy sampling conditions. We have to wear this harness and all this stuff. And you're standing on this slippery concrete ledge with a net, and it's really sketchy. So we saw this, it was over 70, and it actually like broke one of our, we have these huge nets that we just dip net them. They come up to the surface and we dip net them.
Crazy.
It broke one of our nets. It was so big. So we couldn't get that one landed, but it had a tag in it too. Which is another reason why I really wanted it. It was already tagged. So
Sure.
It's really cool. And you can get that recapture information, but we didn't.
Well, you can always try. And it sounds like you gave her the good old college try. And
We did. We failed.
State's out of net now.
Right. Purchase some more.
Valiant effort.
Right. But it's
I think
just
that
so
one's worth a new net.
Yeah.
Sounds like you hopefully upgraded, though. You're going to get them this year.
Right. Hopefully. Can get that. I don't even know if we got it in the net, if I could be able to haul it up this. Got to haul them up this stupid like cliff type deal, and it's tough. So I don't even know if I could haul it.
What's a 60-inch fish weigh roughly on the St. Croix?
Oh gosh.
I mean, is that 80 pounds, 90 pounds?
No, not that much.
Okay.
It's probably anywhere from 40 to 50. So when we're sampling these fish, they're post spawn.
Yeah.
It's like in late May, early June. So they're pretty skinny at that point. So if, we got them pre-spawn, they would probably be around that weight range.
Yeah, and I grew up over on Lake Winnebago, and that particular line of Lake Sturgeon is very, very large in comparison. So I've got a different perspective.
Gotcha. Yeah, those are some toads.
Yeah, I've seen the 180 some pounder that was speared. That's one of the records. They have a mountain at one of the hook and spear clubs over there, and it's pretty big.
It's impressive.
I don't know how you would dip that fish.
No.
That looks more like you need a tail rope and a gaff to get that thing anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
So is there anything with the St. Croix you wanted to mention real quick while we're on the topic? You mentioned rare species, I think, to me earlier.
Yeah. This has just been kind of a little issue that's been kind of coming up here and there. And so the St. Croix is super diverse, and it has several rare, threatened, endangered species, including the crystal darter. We were able to sample some of those this past year. River red horse, that's kind of a hot topic, or it's been brought up, several times in the past year. It's classified as threatened right now. And so there's several red horse species present in the St. Croix, and they all look fairly similar, especially to someone who is not familiar with them. People just consider them a sucker, rough fish, whatever. But river red horse are threatened. The other species are not. There's been some issues with people harvesting, whether with bow and arrow or hook and line, whatever, red horse, and just kind of dumping them on the bank or whatever. And there's this threatened species here, and the majority of people are not going to know the difference between these species. So,
is there a way a seasoned angler could tell?
If yeah, you could. I mean, even sometimes for us, it's hard. But there is, and this summer we're gonna post, a bunch of signs at all the boat landings and the access points to try to let people know that there are these species here, and just to watch out for them, because I think it's probably just a lack of education most times, that people just don't know that there are these
Well,
species and that they're similar.
quick comment.
Yeah.
I was on the Upper St. Croix a lot this summer. It's where I guided predominantly. It's outside of your management area, but it's just above the dam where you're sampling.
Okay.
I'm a few miles north of there, but same waterway. And I saw just an abundant number of suckers. And
Hmm.
I will say that about the Apple River that I've fished as well. Now, granted, those are just probably your random river sucker. But looking at that and thinking of a bow fisherman, I
Hmm.
don't know how I would be able to discern any type of
Yeah.
different species of sucker, number one. And
Hmm.
I don't know if there was a increase in other suckers that are causing some of that with the red horse. I don't know if that's a dynamic to it, but I will tell you, I part of it was the water was really low in a lot of these rivers this year, but
Yeah.
I saw a lot more suckers than I ever remember seeing.
Right. Yeah. There's a ton out there, and so one good thing about the river is very similar to the greater red horse, and both of these species have red tails, like usually very bright red tails. So um, if people see red tail and they're getting ready to shoot or whatever, maybe it's better not to, just so you don't confuse those two. But they are in the apple as well, all of these species. So I mean, it's really hard, it's tough. But I just thought I would bring that up because it has been an issue. People are concerned that these fish are getting harvested when they have this status. So we're just going to be posting signs at the boat ramps to try to educate people that these are here, they're threatened, this is what they look like, just to get that in people's minds, I guess. But it's like you said, it's so hard. There's so many sucker species and red horse species that it's tough to tell them apart. Tough for us sometimes too, because they're very similar. But I just
Yeah,
wanted to bring that up. Thought it was good. to
no,
Talk
I
about.
think that's good. And knowing these factors and educating the public is really the only way we're all going to figure it out. I had no idea. So I appreciate you educating me as well. And I think these opportunities extend well with the listeners.
Awesome. Yeah, the St. Croix is just so diverse, and it's so cool, for that reason and many others. And like I'm still learning, all about the mussel species and how they have specific fish hosts, and it's so much diversity, and it's just really cool that we have this in this river, and so we can
I,
hopefully
I,
try to conserve that together.
I recently, I don't know if the DNR published it or where I saw it, but I think there's 4 endangered mussel species and something like 80 different mussel species within the system in the St.
Yeah.
Croix. It's
Yeah.
pretty, that was really staggering. And I was asked to give a presentation by that's my dog over there. She decided to
Wake up.
to remind me it's time to wrap this thing up pretty quickly here.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I gave a presentation for the TU chapter over out of River Falls about the St. Croix and just
Yeah.
fishing opportunities that exist on the upper part from a guide's perspective. And yeah, just some of that's why I love the St. Croix, and I always go back to it because every time I dig into it, there's so much history and just it's been traveled for 10,000 years. There's history of man being there, and um, we've done so much to it in the last 200 years to see where it's at in its current state is kind of unbelievable. It's just it's a really great success story of, I think, conservation and living with nature and trying to conserve what's important.
Yeah, I
So,
totally agree. It's just an outstanding resource, and every time I'm
and
on it,
and
it just impresses me.
and you guys are doing a pretty good job to compete with that with a lot of the trout water. And I got to give you some kudos because you're managing it in a way to deal with an increased amount in fishing pressure, and you're creating a lot of opportunity out of that, which is just amazing to kind of be fighting the grain on that. So it's really cool to see, and I'm excited to be a guide in Western Wisconsin and in part of your fishery. So it's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Very cool.
So one last thing I want to ask you about, and if you can maybe give us a little highlight, need to dive too deep into this, but um, and it's a little bit of a selfish topic too, I have to say. I've I drive over a lot of really good water sometimes, and on my way over to fish the Chippewa or the Flambeau, I constantly drive over the Red Cedar. I have
Hmm.
friends that tell me that they fish it. Like most fishermen, they're a little hush hush. They don't really share much, and my uncle stays over in Chautauqua and does the crappie thing. And so I've kind of scouted that upper area of the Red Cedar from an access perspective, but it's a significantly long river and fishery, and it's dynamic in itself because you've got the flowage system that really wreaks a lot of havoc in
Hmm.
certain times of the year. So if a person like myself who's never really been over there, and you were gonna send them in a direction from, I want a nice float, both got beauty, and then a decent fishing opportunity. The fish is kind of secondary to access and nice water and just enjoying Wisconsin.
Hmm.
Um, what what part of that river would you kind of recommend people look at, and maybe what can you give listeners a little bit of a highlight on the Red Cedar?
Yeah, the Red Cedar is very cool, very different from the St. Croix, obviously, but still has some really good fisheries. Smallmouth bass, walleye, um, even musky here or there if you get up into Barron County. Um, but I would recommend, south of 64. So I concentrate on the Dunn County portion, but south of 64, anywhere to like all the way to Colfax. It's very scenic. There's a couple different takeout points where you can have, a nice day float. Um, Highly recommend that section. You're not going to probably run into anyone on that whole section. It's really good fishing, beautiful, for either kayak, canoe, whatever. So there's that section. Um, Barron County, if you're interested in going up there, I'm not as familiar with it, but the Barron County, like county website has a great map of like put in and take out points and the length between them and how long it takes to float them. So I'd highly recommend checking that out. But for Dunn County, you could put in at 64. And there's a couple county roads that you can put in and take out for a day float. The lower Red Cedar below Menominee is also a great option. You could you could put in at Menominee, go to Downsville to Dunnville. That's also a very scenic float. Um, it's bigger water, a little bit higher gradient in some spots, but similar fishery, but you kind of get more of the big river species down there. You get more catfish, sturgeon, and all of that, as well as some musky here and there. So it's a little bit different, but also very nice floats, if that's what you're into, and really nice fisheries too. Smallmouth.
Yeah.
I would say if you want to target smallmouth and or walleye, maybe go upstream of Tanner in the upper part. But there's still down in the downstream area, but if you want those more bigger river species like catfish or something, definitely go downstream.
So I'm curious with one thing you said, and we can kind of wrap things up after that. And I appreciate your highlight there. I think my assumptions were kind of similar to what you had highlighted. I'm
Mhm.
kind of interested in that that northern Dunn County portion. I think too, just from a quiet perspective.
Yeah.
Just by chance, there's probably going to be less people from just proximity of where it is. But
Right.
regardless of all that, you said the musky. You mentioned in Barron County. It seemed like you gave the perception that there were more musky than down in Dunn County in that stretch of the river. And I'm curious why that either is a fact or not a fact, or can you square that one away for me real quickly? Because I thought it caught me off guard a little bit.
Yeah, don't quote me on it because I'm not the biologist up there, but
No, I get it.
yeah, so they are.
But you handle the Dunn County water, so I'm kind of curious as why you would say that.
Yeah, well, I don't stock the Dunn County water with musky, but they are stocked in Barron County, and in the flowages up there. I believe, still in the river.
Oh, okay. Oh, they were at one point?
They were at one point. I'm like 90% sure that they're still being stocked in the river. So the biologist up there
I won't hold you to it.
Yeah, you can ask him.
You might is that Aaron?
It is Aaron, but he actually just accepted a supervisor position. So
I talked to him. Yeah, I talked to him and of course we kind of got into talking and it was right in the middle of hunting season and I just had so much on my plate and he was changing jobs and
gotcha.
Yeah, we've touched base since hunting season's been over, but I need to get in touch with him. So I'll put that on the list for maybe touch base with Aaron or his replacement.
Yeah, he does have a replacement now, so that's cool.
Yeah, he did mention that he sounded like he was going to have a replacement pretty quickly, which for you folks over at the DNR, that sounded like he hit the lottery over there.
Yeah.
So I at least from the folks over in the bird hunting department, the Upland game bird ecologist position that seemed to float around a little bit on other people's laughs. So Elena Garris has been on the podcast. So she's now not in that position. And I just had Taylor, who's the migratory bird specialist, who's now fielding calls from pheasant hunters on the show. So yeah, I hope that position gets filled. And when it does, I would love to talk to him. So, but anyways,
definitely.
That's for another day. I will be in touch on a few of these things because I do want to have you back on the show during the summer to just see how things went with a few things and touch base on where you're doing krill surveys this upcoming year and things like that. So
cool.
Is there anything lastly that you'd like to close out with that you may have missed or we grazed over? If not, we can save it for another show.
Yeah, I think we're good. We covered a lot. It was really good. And I just really appreciate you having me on here. This is a great opportunity and great platform to discuss some of these topics that I otherwise wouldn't get to. So yeah, just appreciative of the opportunity.
Well, and I appreciate you just kind of having the candor and open conversation because I think, like you said, it allows you to have a different platform to have a more in-depth conversation and a little bit more of an unveiling for the public as to why maybe some of these decisions are made. So I think it's really good. It breaks down the barrier of, hey, well, you're part of the government and I'm part of the people and we're all people here at the end of the day. And I think it's good for everybody to understand, you and the position you're in and kind of what some of the decisions that you have to deal with every day. And I think this is a great platform for that.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. We all have the same goal. Awesome. We all want to make it better. So
yeah, well, and I appreciate, like I told you earlier, you're doing a fantastic job and I appreciate everything you guys are doing. And there's a reason I'm a licensed guide in Wisconsin. So
cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, Kasey, if you don't mind holding on for a quick second, I think we're going to wrap things up here for today. So thanks everybody for listening and we'll see you on the next podcast. To an end again. thank you for listening to the end of episode 46. Quick reminder, episode 47 will drop this week. It is with Jordan Weeks. He's the musky biologist for Western Wisconsin. Make sure you're subscribed, download, and if you would be so kind, leave us a rating and review. One last reminder, folks, I am going to be out at the Minnesota Sharptail Grouse Society Spring Fling and Double Gun Shoot on April 30th. Come on out. It's in Pine City at Wings North. Check out the information in the show notes. Final pitch for the hats. There are a few left. Join Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/amazingoutdoors. There's a couple left. You want one of these hats. It's $5. Go get one. All right, spring's here. I am going to get out of the studio. The dogs want to run. The trout are starting to rise. There is a lot of work to be done. Shoot straight, folks. Tight lines. This is Brian Mays, and I am signing out.